The Trafficked Girl Who Killed 30,000. The Dark Reign of Empress Theodora. Chapter 1. Born in chains, Constantinople. Pause, the jewel of the Byzantine world. Linger. Its domes gleamed with gold, its streets thrummed with commerce, and its people swore allegiance not only to the emperor, but to rival factions that controlled everything from sports to politics. At the center of it all stood the Hippodrome. It was not just a stadium. Pause. It was a furnace of cheers and fury, where 80,000 voices could rise in unison. And within this roaring cauldron, low-voiced children were offered to the crowd. Performances that masqueraded as theater were, in truth, acts of cruelty. Animals clawed at small bodies as coins rained down. To the audience, it was spectacle. To the children, pause, it was a sentence. From this crucible of humiliation emerged a girl who would one day seize control of the empire itself. Her name was Theodora. Linger. Her descent began with tragedy. Her father, Acacius the Bearkeeper, held a respected place in the Greens, one of two factions that ruled Constantinople like rival governments. But when he died suddenly, corruption struck. Instead of protecting his widow and daughters, the Greens sold his post to another man. Theodora, her sisters, and her mother were cast aside, stripped of protection. Her mother faced a choice no parent should endure: watch her daughters starve, or hand them to the Hippodrome's brutal machine. She chose survival. Pause. Before 80,000 spectators, 3 little girls were paraded as supplicants, wreaths of laurel crowning their heads. It was not performance. Pause. It was an advertisement. The Greens turned away, but the Blues, moved to pity, offered her stepfather a position. Theodora never forgot. Linger. One faction betrayed her family, the other saved them. That memory, burned into her as a child, would fuel her vengeance for life. Chapter 2. The Theater of Pain. At just 10 years old, Theodora was pushed into spectacles designed not for art, but for low-voice degradation. Her body became the stage. Pause. Her life became survival. Audiences roared and tossed coins. But behind the curtains in shadowed chambers, young performers were treated as possessions. By law itself, actresses carried a permanent mark, denied protection, denied dignity. What shattered many. Pause. Theodora turned into an education. Night after night, she studied the powerful men who thought themselves untouchable. Senators, judges, merchants, all of them unraveled in her presence, stripped of reason and restraint. She watched carefully how greed clouded judgment, how obsession made men weak, how desire could become a leash. What destroyed other children became, for her, a curriculum. The Hippodrome was her university. Chapter 3. The Governor's Concubine. By 16, Theodora had become infamous, whispered about in the streets. Then came an offer wrapped in luxury. Hibis, the Syrian governor of Libya, wanted her not for a night. Pause, but forever. He offered her a place as his companion. For Theodora, it was escape. Palaces, silk servants, linger, safety, or at least the illusion of it. But she used those years, as she always had, to study. Every word Hibis spoke, every weakness she recorded in her mind. The governor who commanded soldiers and ships was powerless when she withheld what he craved most. But she pressed too far. When she began influencing his decisions, his fury ignited. She was cast out, her belongings hurled into the desert sand. Forced to journey back across the Mediterranean, she survived ship by ship, man by man. But this time, each encounter was data. A merchant revealed trade secrets. A captain confessed smuggling routes. A soldier spilled military gossip. By the time she reached Alexandria, Theodora was no longer a victim. She was a predator. There she turned to faith, but not for salvation. She converted to monophysite Christianity, forging ties with bishops and priests. It was not religion. Pause. It was strategy. Rumors of her survival spread quickly. Stories of a girl who had endured the hippodrome, outwitted a governor, and returned stronger. A man in Constantinople was listening. His name was Justinian. Chapter 4. The Seduction of Power. In Antioch, she crossed paths with performers tied to the Blues, the faction that had once saved her family. Rumors traveled back to Constantinople of a woman who had survived the hippodrome, manipulated a governor, and endured exile. When she returned to the city, its golden domes gleaming above her, Theodora was not the same girl who had left. In 522 CE, Prince Justinian, heir to the Byzantine throne, laid eyes on her for the first time. To him, she was simply another former actress. Beautiful, yes, but disposable. He had no idea he was staring at a woman who had spent 16 years mastering the destruction of powerful men. For Theodora, seduction was not intimacy. It was warfare. Every glance was calculated. Every whisper was designed to bind him deeper. She uncovered his longing for conversation, his hunger for connection, his craving for someone who understood him. These vulnerabilities she had exploited countless times before. Within months, Justinian was ensnared. What he thought was love was dependence. What he thought was passion was programming. When he declared he would marry her, the empire erupted. Once an actress, always an actress. That was the law. A whore could never be an empress. The Senate raged. The current empress, Euphemia, stood as an immovable wall. She herself had risen from slavery, but she would not allow a prostitute to take the throne. Then, in 523 CE, Euphemia died suddenly in her sleep. No illness, no warning, no witnesses. Coincidence or calculation? History whispers but never answers. What mattered was this. Within hours, a new law appeared. Former actresses could marry men of high rank. It was legislation carved with Theodora's name. And 2 years later, the girl once humiliated on the hippodrome floor walked down the marble aisle of the Hagia Sophia, dressed in imperial purple. She was no longer a child for sale. She was the future Empress of Rome. Chapter 5. The Purple Shroud. The Hagia Sophia. Its marble aisles glittered with torchlight as nobles and priests gathered. Down that aisle in imperial purple walked Theodora. The girl, once humiliated before the mob, was now Justinian's wife and future Empress of Rome. But soon, her resolve would face its greatest trial. In January 532, Constantinople erupted. For the first time, the Blues and the Greens united in rebellion. Their cry shook the city. Nika, conquer! Flames consumed the Hagia Sophia. The Senate House collapsed. A rival emperor was crowned. Inside the palace, panic reigned. Advisors begged Justinian to flee. Ships waited in the harbor, but then Theodora rose. My opinion, she said, her voice cold, emphasis, is that this is no time for flight. May I never be separated from this purple. Royalty is the finest burial shroud. Her words silenced the council, and Justinian chose massacre. In the hippodrome, rebels gathered to celebrate. The gates slammed shut. Soldiers stormed in. By nightfall, 30,000 corpses littered the arena floor. The same stage that once humiliated Theodora became her altar of vengeance. Chapter 6. The Empire of Fear. After the massacre, Justinian reshaped his empire. From 535 onward, governors swore loyalty not just to him, but to Theodora. For the first time in Roman history, a woman stood as co-ruler. But her empire was not built on ceremony. It was built on low-voice fear. She created a shadow court, a web of spies and informants. Eunuchs and servants whispered in corridors, collecting secrets. Who betrayed whom? Who craved power? whose sins could be used against them. Every senator, every bishop, every general knew the Empress had their weakness in her hands, and when subjects entered her presence, they bowed low, kissing not only Justinian's feet, but hers. The humiliation she once endured, she now forced upon the empire. Chapter 7. Assassinations and Shadows. Her enemies fell one by one. When Pope Silvius resisted her religious allies, she arranged false charges. He died in exile. When Queen Amalasuntha of the Ostrogoths grew too close to Justinian, Theodora struck. The queen was murdered in her bath, stripped of dignity and death. And when John the Cappadocian, prefect of the East, resisted her manipulations, she broke him with terror. For months he received chilling gifts, wilted flowers, tiny daggers, paintings of executions. Paranoia consumed him. Finally, she staged a false conspiracy involving his daughter. Stripped of his power, he died a beggar in Egypt. Theodora did not merely defeat her enemies. She dismantled them. Chapter 8. Laws written in blood, yet her most enduring weapon was law itself. With Justinian, she reshaped Roman law, encoding her suffering into the empire's very foundation. She outlawed forced exploitation. She closed brothels that trapped women. She decreed that abuse was punishable by death, no matter the abuser's rank. She expanded divorce rights for women. She transferred the wealth of oppressors to their victims. Each law was not just reform. It was retribution. But even her mercy bore control. She forced former performers into convents, stripping them of choice. Freedom, low voice, only on her terms. Chapter 9. The Last Performance. On June 28th, 548 CE, Theodora died at just 48 years old, likely of cancer. For Justinian, it was devastation. He never remarried. His empire, once sharp under her influence, drifted into weakness. In Ravenna's Basilica of San Vitale, a mosaic still shows her, haloed, robed in purple, immortalized as holy. But behind the glittering tiles lies a darker truth. Theodora's reign was forged in pain, sharpened by humiliation, and unleashed through fear. She proved that suffering does not only create victims. Sometimes it forges predators. She turned the lessons of abuse into weapons of empire. And she showed the world how terrifyingly thin the line can be between the powerless and the destroyer. Long pause. This low voice was the story of Theodora, the girl who rose from the hippodrome floor to the imperial throne. Emphasis, and left 30,000 corpses in her wake.